Carrollton, Georgia. Early morning on February 20th, 2025, a 5-year-old girl woke up, walked into her parents' bedroom, and screamed in terror. Police arrived just minutes later, but what they found left the entire community in shock.
My name is Jaden Brock, and I am 12 years old. I wanted to talk today because my dad and stepmom was shot and killed.
And then, among a trail of seemingly meaningless clues, the name of a 17-year-old girl began to emerge. But was it the truth, or a carefully staged illusion? The family of Sarah Grace Patrick lived in Carrollton, Carroll County, Georgia, and had once been seen as the picture of a typical American household. The mother, 41-year-old Kristen Brock, had divorced her first husband, Dorn Patrick, before remarrying 45-year-old James Brock, a man who had survived a severe heart crisis and relied on an LVAD device, a machine that kept him alive by helping his heart function. Together, they had a young daughter named Jai, age 5, while 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick was Kristen's daughter from her previous marriage to Dorn, who often picked her up on weekends. In the past, the family had struggled with issues related to the use of prohibited substances, which had caused turmoil for quite some time. However, after overcoming those hardships, they rediscovered their faith and became active members of Catalyst Church, a local congregation known as a symbol of renewal and hope. To the community, they represented a family that had learned to rise from past mistakes, living with kindness and deep devotion to their faith. Yet behind that seemingly perfect image, quiet cracks had begun to form. The relationship between Sarah and her stepfather, James, grew increasingly tense. The teenager had often expressed her desire to move back in with her biological father, showing resentment and frequently arguing with her mother and stepfather. Neighbors recalled that Kristen once confided her daughter had become hard to control and was no longer willing to listen. On Thursday morning, February 20th, 2025, at around 7:15 a.m., a calm stillness filled the small house on Tyus Road in Carrollton, Georgia. The first rays of sunlight had just slipped through the window when 5-year-old Jay woke up and walked into her parents' bedroom. But what she saw next shattered the peace of that home forever. On the bedroom floor, James Brock and Kristen Brock lay motionless, surrounded by dark stains on the carpet. It was a sight far too heavy for a child to comprehend. Jay's cries echoed through the house, waking 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick, her half-sister. Sarah rushed in, desperately pulling Jay into her arms in an attempt to calm her, but the terror was too overwhelming for the little girl to stop crying. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Sarah immediately ran to the phone and called the police. Carrollton County Police in Georgia arrived just minutes after the emergency call was made. Nearly half a dozen officers quickly entered the residence. Inside the upstairs bedroom, they found James Brock and Kristen Brock as lying side by side, surrounded by dark stains on the floor. Yet what puzzled investigators most was the eerie stillness that hung in the air. There were no signs of struggle, no broken windows, no forced doors. Everything inside the house was intact, as if the entire tragedy had unfolded in complete silence. Only one detail stood out. A single door had been left slightly ajar for reasons unknown. Realizing they were dealing with a potentially serious case, officers immediately secured the scene, stretched yellow police tape around the property, and called in forensic technicians to collect evidence. Every small trace was examined, from marks on the floor and fabric fibers to the faint fingerprints left behind. With such a sealed environment, the likelihood grew that the person responsible was someone familiar with the family, someone who knew their routines, the time they slept, and the layout of the home. But at that point, detectives could not draw any conclusions. They needed to let the evidence speak for itself. Meanwhile, another urgent matter arose. Where would the two children go? Carrollton County Social Services quickly stepped in, assigning Caitlin O'Keefe, a juvenile caseworker, to temporarily care for Sarah Grace Patrick and Jay, two little girls who had just lost everything overnight. Before Sarah Grace Patrick's biological father, Dorn Patrick, divorced her mother, Caitlin O'Keefe had already been a familiar face to the family, a close friend who had known Dorn for years. When the tragedy struck, Caitlin became the only person Sarah still felt she could trust. Her presence as a temporary guardian gave the teenager a fragile sense of stability amid the chaos of loss. Within just a few days, Sarah returned to school. Teachers described her demeanor as unusually calm, composed, orderly, showing no visible signs of distress or grief one might expect from a girl who had just lost both her mother and stepfather. Yet behind that controlled exterior, Sarah began to display a series of strange behaviors, actions that prosecutors would later describe as the first signs of a calculated plan. The defense, however, would never have imagined that those very actions would become the most crucial pieces of evidence against her in court. After her first marriage with Dorn Patrick ended, Kristen Brock began dating James Brock. The two remained together for 10 years before officially marrying in December 2023, working to build a new blended family. It was a complex household. Sarah and her brother were Kristen's children from her previous marriage, while 5-year-old Jai was James's daughter from an earlier relationship. From the outside, they appeared to be a happy, loving family. But beneath the surface, unresolved tensions continued to quietly simmer. James Brock had long struggled with serious heart problems. To stay alive, he depended on a left ventricular assist device, or LVAD, a battery-powered mechanical pump implanted in his chest to help his weakened heart keep functioning. What seemed at first to be only a medical detail would later become a crucial link in the entire case. In 2021, James's condition turned critical, and for a moment, it seemed he would not survive. During that time, Kristen Brock shared a prayer request on social media, asking the community to join her in seeking a miracle. Through strength and faith, James pulled through the crisis and went on to live for several more years, until that fateful morning of February 20th, 2025. Before the tragedy, the defense would later argue that James and Kristen had completely turned their lives around, leaving behind their troubled past to become devoted parents and faithful believers. But court records revealed a far more complicated reality. Documents showed that the couple had previously been involved with the use of prohibited substances, an issue that had contributed to the collapse of Kristen's first marriage to Dorn Patrick in 2018. In the custody dispute records, the court stated, "The mother struggles with significant issues related to the use of harmful substances and has not fully recovered. Both she and her partner are unable to provide a stable, safe environment free of endangerment for the minor child." After months of legal conflict, a joint agreement was reached. Kristen retained primary custody, while Dorn was granted alternating weekend visits. In the years that followed, James and Kristen publicly declared that they had found faith and rebuilt their lives, becoming active members of Catalyst Church in Carrollton. Georgia, about 45 miles west of Atlanta. They attended every service, volunteered regularly, and were admired by the community as symbols of restoration and hope. When tragedy struck, Catalyst Church held a memorial service to honor their memory. The church was filled to capacity, tears streaming down the faces of friends and family. James's eldest son from his first marriage stood at the pulpit, his voice breaking as he delivered his farewell. Beside him, dressed in dark clothing, stood Sarah Grace Patrick, who was also invited to speak before the entire congregation.
I just wanted to say goodbye to my mama and Jamie since we never got the chance to. I was so used to you guys always being here to the point that I never once thought to imagine y'all not being here. I didn't have a single clue how much I needed y'all until now. For James, thank you for all the life lessons you taught me and for being the best bonus dad ever. Your heart will finally be healed in heaven and neither of y'all will be in any pain anymore. Although that gives me so much comfort, your fight was not supposed to end there. Although there's nothing we can do to bring them back, we still have control over how we treat people with us today. Therefore, when someone tries to tell you anything, no matter how important it could be, just listen, because you never know when it's somebody's time to go. You can say goodnight and wake up a few hours just to find out they aren't there, despite their joy and their love. So just listen and never take a hug or anyone or anything for granted and love with all that you have in you like they did.
Before the tragedy, Sarah Grace Patrick was an active social media user, especially on TikTok. Like many of her peers, she spent hours each day watching videos, keeping up with trends, and creating her own content. But unlike most teenagers, Sarah had a particular fascination with true crime videos, detailed investigations, forensic analyses, and stories that unraveled hidden truths, captivating millions of viewers. She understood how true crime creators structured their narratives, built suspense, and even how real investigators operated in actual cases. However, after the loss of James and Kristen Brock, Sarah's behavior began to take an unsettling turn, one that went far beyond the boundaries of normal grief. She started sending messages to multiple true crime content creators across various platforms: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all with a strangely similar tone and topic. In these messages, Sarah asked them to cover the case of her parents, describing the story as if it were an intriguing piece of entertainment. Instead of showing sorrow over her loss, she spoke about the incident as a fascinating case, turning her family's tragedy into material for a video. The content creators who received messages from Sarah Grace Patrick said they felt deeply uneasy and disturbed. This was not a normal request. They found it difficult to understand how a teenager who had just endured the loss of her parents could speak about the tragedy as if it were an engaging story to share online. The way Sarah described the passing of James and Kristen Brock as a fascinating story sent chills down their spines, as if she were turning her family's real pain into content for views. Shortly afterward, one of the creators reported the incident to the authorities. Every screenshot, message, and timestamp was carefully preserved and handed over to investigators, who were already piecing together the growing puzzle of evidence to uncover the truth. And it wasn't just one person. Several other creators also contacted police after receiving nearly identical messages from Sarah. From that point, the picture became clearer. Sarah had systematically reached out to multiple creators, sending a wave of messages designed to shape how the story of her family's case would be told publicly, even before her name appeared on the list of suspects. The defense argued that Sarah Grace Patrick was simply searching for answers, trying to understand what had really happened to James and Kristen Brock. They claimed that her outreach to true crime creators was merely a coping mechanism, a familiar way of processing grief. Since Sarah had always been passionate about the true crime genre and often watched such cases to learn about justice, to them, it was the instinctive reaction of a lost and confused teenager, not something suspicious. However, prosecutors saw things very differently. They viewed her actions as deliberate, calculated, and rooted in image control. According to the prosecution, Sarah wasn't just trying to understand the case. She was trying to control how the public perceived it, actively shaping the narrative before her name even surfaced as a suspect. The messages she sent were far from random. They revealed detailed knowledge of investigative procedures, how cases were portrayed in the media, and how audiences typically reacted to such stories. To the prosecution, this was no longer a sign of grief. It was an effort at damage control. When the investigation began, detectives from Carroll County worked to reconstruct the full timeline of the night the tragedy occurred and determine what had really taken place inside the house on Tyus Road. During her first interview, Sarah Grace Patrick claimed she had been asleep the entire night and hadn't heard anything unusual. She said she only woke up after hearing her little sister Jay scream and then rushed into her parents' bedroom. Sarah insisted she hadn't heard any loud noises during the night. At first, her statement seemed reasonable, until she accidentally revealed one detail that caused her entire account to collapse. When questioned further about that night, Sarah admitted she had heard a loud alarm coming from her stepfather's LVAD device, a persistent, piercing sound that anyone in the house would have noticed. For those familiar with medical equipment, an LVAD, or left ventricular assist device, is a battery-powered mechanical pump that includes an automatic alarm system. The alarm only activates in critical situations such as power disconnection, battery failure, or cardiac arrest. It starts at a moderate volume, but quickly escalates into an urgent, continuous tone that's impossible to ignore, signaling that the patient's condition is life-threatening. Sarah's acknowledgement of hearing that alarm proved that she had been awake and aware during the time frame of the tragedy, directly contradicting her earlier claim that she had been asleep all night. According to the official statement, Sarah Grace Patrick said she went to bed around midnight on February 19, 2025. In her testimony, she admitted to hearing the alarm from her stepfather's LVAD device between 11:40 p.m. and 11:50 p.m., just 10 to 20 minutes before she claimed to have fallen asleep. That wasn't a faint noise. It was an urgent medical alert from the device that kept James Brock's heart functioning. Yet Sarah did not get up to check on him, did not go to see if her stepfather was all right, did not wake her mother, and did not call for help. She simply said she went back to sleep. This indifference became the first major inconsistency in her statement. She heard a loud, distinct alarm, clearly enough to remember and recount it in detail, yet claimed not to have heard any gunfire, even though multiple shots were fired just down the hall in the same house. The defense tried to explain this by arguing that Sarah was a teenager in deep sleep, noting that adolescents have different circadian rhythms and may react slowly to noises. But investigators saw it differently. To them, Sarah's acknowledgement of hearing the LVAD alarm proved she wasn't in deep sleep at all. She was fully awake during the critical moments of the tragedy. Based on forensic evidence, detectives came to believe that Sarah not only knew what was happening, but was the very person who made it happen. And that was only the first of many contradictions they would uncover. The forensic analysis at the scene revealed several crucial details. Ballistics experts and bloodstain pattern analysts conducted measurements and reconstructed the trajectory and position of the shooter. All of their findings pointed to the same conclusion. The shots were fired from very close range, just a few steps away from where James and Kristen Brock were lying in bed. This was not a random attack from a distance. It was a deliberate act carried out at close proximity while both victims were asleep. They had no chance to fight back, no opportunity even to wake up and realize what was happening. There were no defensive wounds, no disturbed furniture, no evidence of a struggle. The blanket remained neatly draped over their bodies, and the pillows were still in place. Everything suggested that the tragedy unfolded quietly in the night, swift and unnoticed. Investigators concluded that whoever committed the act knew exactly how to approach, precisely where each person was positioned, and the moment when they were most vulnerable. For several consecutive days, the Carroll County crime scene team worked tirelessly to collect every possible trace inside the house on Tyus Road in Carrollton, Georgia. Every surface was dusted for fingerprints, and every fiber, strand of hair, or unusual particle was carefully gathered and sealed. Each droplet of fluid, every shell casing, and fragment of metal was documented and photographed from multiple angles. Forensic specialists analyzed blood pattern distributions, while the reconstruction unit mapped out the trajectory of each bullet to determine the exact positions and directions of fire. Every centimeter of the room was examined with precision, because that very house, with its haunting silence, was silently telling the story that no one had heard on that fateful night. Downstairs, everything appeared perfectly ordinary. The kitchen tidy, the living room undisturbed, furniture still in its place. But climbing the stairs, the atmosphere changed entirely. On the second floor, inside the bedroom that once served as the resting place of James and Kristen Brock, 2 lives had quietly come to an end. Neighbors along Tyus Road all confirmed that the night of February 19, 2025, passed with an unusual calm. No one heard any screams or sounds of commotion coming from the Brock family's home. Only one neighbor recalled hearing a few loud pops around midnight, but assumed they were fireworks. In rural Georgia, that wasn't uncommon. People often set off fireworks to celebrate a birthday or simply for fun. No one imagined that those sounds carried a far darker and more chilling meaning. On July 1, 2025, nearly 4 months after the tragedy in Carrollton, Georgia, the case seemed to have faded into silence. Media attention had waned, and 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick continued living with her guardian, Caitlin O'Keefe, returning to school and trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. But that morning, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office unexpectedly issued an official arrest warrant for Sarah Grace Patrick after compiling comprehensive forensic evidence, digital data, and witness statements. She was charged with 2 counts of taking a life and 2 counts of aggravated assault, marking a major turning point in the investigation. With that warrant, a 17-year-old girl, once seen as the only surviving victim of the Brock family tragedy, now stood accused at the center of it. On July 8, 2025, just 1 week after the arrest warrant was issued, Sarah Grace Patrick voluntarily turned herself in.
Also this midday, a Carroll County 17-year-old is facing murder charges, accused of killing her own mother and stepfather. The sheriff's office says Sarah Grace Patrick turned herself in Tuesday morning after warrants were issued for her arrest.
Dorn Patrick drove her to the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, where she was formally processed, fingerprinted, photographed, and booked according to standard procedure. Due to the particularly serious nature of the case, The district attorney's office announced that Sarah would be prosecuted as an adult, despite being only 17 years old. This decision meant she would face the full weight of the adult criminal justice system, including incarceration in an adult correctional facility and harsher sentencing guidelines if found guilty. Up to this point, Carroll County authorities have not released any official details about the ongoing investigation. All key information has been kept confidential to protect the prosecution's strategy for the upcoming trial. However, the evidence collected so far has gradually begun to connect, revealing a complex picture of the case. At 17, Sarah Grace Patrick was not an ordinary girl. She was deeply fascinated by the true crime genre, spending hundreds of hours watching forensic investigations, unsolved cases, and police interrogation footage. She knew how detectives searched for clues, understood the mistakes that often led to an offender's capture, and was familiar with the entire process of evidence collection, from DNA sampling and blood pattern analysis to digital data recovery. But what Sarah failed to understand was the boundary between theory and reality. It's one thing to know how criminals are caught through the screen of a phone. It's something entirely different to face the real pressure of a crime scene, where every mistake leaves behind traces that can never be erased. Sarah Grace Patrick's personal devices were seized by Carroll County Police just hours after the tragedy at the Taos Roadhouse in Carrollton, Georgia. Her phones, computer, and tablet were immediately sealed and sent to a digital forensics lab for analysis. This prompt action happened before Sarah had any real opportunity to think things through or try to erase traces, so critical data remained intact. Experts quickly extracted everything they could: search history, text messages, social media activity, and even files that appeared to have been deleted. Thanks to advanced recovery technology, many repeatedly deleted items were fully restored. It was inside that trove of data that investigators discovered incriminating search queries. Questions like, how to dispose of the weapon? Can police trace a bullet? And how long does forensic analysis take? All of these searches were made weeks before the tragic incident. And to investigators, they no longer looked like the curiosity of a teen who liked true crime content, but rather clear signs of planning and premeditation. Messages extracted from Sarah Grace Patrick's phone revealed that she harbored deep negative emotions toward her parents. She often texted friends to vent her frustration, anger, and growing resentment. At times, her words reflected deep emotional pain and a desire to escape from the tense and strained relationship at home. These conversations later became key evidence that helped investigators better understand her mindset and potential motive behind the tragedy. Every screenshot was preserved, timestamps were recorded precisely, and the context was carefully established. Bit by bit, the digital trail led police closer to the truth. Some of Sarah's posts on TikTok also drew investigators' attention. Instead of expressing grief over her loss, they carried a tone of calculation and intent, as if she were trying to control how the public perceived the story. Although officials have not yet released an official cause, early findings suggest that the tragedy may have stemmed from long-standing family tension, endless arguments, and resentment that had built up over time. A neighbor, in an interview with local media, also confirmed that Kristen had confided about the challenges in her relationship with her daughter, saying Sarah had become defiant, argumentative, and increasingly difficult to manage.
All she said was Sarah Grace was bucking her because she didn't want to be there. She wanted to live with her daddy.
The neighbor chose not to share further details, not wanting to speak negatively about those who had passed. but the hesitation in their voice was enough to suggest that behind those closed doors, life inside the Brock household had not been as peaceful as it appeared. However, as investigators began piecing the clues together, one critical element kept the case at a standstill. The dangerous object used in the incident was nowhere to be found. Immediately after securing the scene, Carroll County investigators launched a large-scale search. Every room in the Tyus Road home in Carrollton, Georgia, was meticulously examined following strict forensic procedures. The backyard was combed over inch by inch, and the surrounding woods were searched with K9 units and metal detectors. No area was overlooked, from drainage systems and sewer ditches to small neighborhood ponds. Every location was scoured, with some even drained completely to ensure no evidence was missed. Yet after days of exhaustive searching, the results remained the same. Nothing. No physical evidence was recovered, leaving the case more mysterious than ever. Records from Carroll County show that no member of the Brock family had ever registered ownership of any dangerous object. There was no evidence of storage facilities, ammunition, or secured safes, nor any indication that they had ever used or been trained to handle such equipment. The complete absence of legal traces raised a series of questions for investigators. Where did the weapon come from? Who supplied it? Did that person understand its intended use? And was anyone else involved as an intermediary? One theory suggested that Sarah Grace Patrick may have obtained it from an outside source, possibly through a friend at school or via a private, illegal transaction. In Georgia, laws regulating private transfers of dangerous objects are relatively lenient, as private sales are not required to include background checks or registration records, allowing cash exchanges to occur without leaving a paper trail. After the incident, it is highly likely that the weapon was disposed of, possibly thrown into a river, buried in the woods, or returned to the original provider. If the user had attempted to wipe fingerprints or eliminate evidence, locating it would have been even more difficult. Even so, there are indications that investigators have recovered biological samples and critical forensic traces that could link the suspect to the weapon, though all such details remain sealed within internal files as part of the prosecution's strategy. No information has been leaked, and no formal statements have been issued by the district attorney's office. Every detail remains securely sealed until the trial begins. Investigators believe that surveillance footage could play a crucial role in uncovering the truth. The Brock family's home sat in a quiet wooded area along Tyus Road in Carrollton, Georgia, relatively isolated from nearby neighbors, offering privacy but making direct observation difficult. However, even in rural areas, today's network of cameras is extensive, from Ring doorbells and private home security systems to traffic cameras along main roads. A single recording captured at the right moment could hold the missing piece of the case. According to the investigative direction, one leading theory suggests that a camera may have recorded footage of Sarah Grace Patrick leaving the house late at night or early in the morning, possibly carrying something and heading somewhere she wasn't supposed to be, a detail investigators consider highly significant. Combining digital traces such as phone location data, browsing history, and surveillance footage with the physical evidence collected at the scene is exactly how modern cases are pieced together and solved. The first person invited to speak in court was Pastor Ben Bonner, the head of Catalyst Church in Carrollton, Georgia, the congregation that had long been close to the Brock family. He had known them for many years, witnessing their journey of transformation, from individuals who had once stumbled in the past to people who rediscovered their faith and became devoted believers.
To Honorable Judge, my name is Ben Bonner, and I serve as lead pastor at Catalyst Church in Carrollton, Georgia. I'm writing on behalf of Sarah Grace Patrick, a young woman who's been a part of our church family for about a year now. Sarah Grace first came to Catalyst around a year ago. From the beginning, she was eager to grow in her faith and get involved. She made a personal decision to be baptized not long after attending, and has stayed consistently connected to the church ever since. She didn't just show up on Sundays, she came during the week as well, asked questions, served, invited others, including her boyfriend at the time, and clearly found a place where she felt at home. Throughout the past year, and even through the challenges of this year, she has continued to attend services regularly. She and her family often travel over an hour just to be with us. I've spoken and prayed with Sarah Grace many times throughout this season. Her commitment to staying grounded in her faith and connected to a healthy community has remained steady. She's even called from jail multiple times so I could pray with her. Her father has also become an active part of the church. He was baptized recently, and he still comes to services faithfully. If it's possible and the court sees fit to grant Sarah Grace bond, we would gladly continue to walk alongside her as a church. We believe having her with her family and church community is an important part of her support system. We're committed to loving her well, encouraging her, and helping her continue on a positive path.
The next person called to testify was Caitlin O'Keefe, the woman who took Sarah Grace Patrick into her care immediately after the tragedy and who had witnessed the teenagers every day during that period of turmoil.
Did you have any disciplinary problems or any type of issues with Sarah while she was at your house?
Not even one, honestly. I've had some teenagers and one that gave me a hard time, and Sarah was a pleasure. She was easy.
In her testimony before the court, Caitlin O'Keefe stated, "I never saw any sign that this girl could be involved in what she's being accused of. Sarah was always kind, cooperative, and well-behaved. She helped me prepare dinner, played with the younger kids, finished her schoolwork, and acted like a normal teenager trying to get through a painful loss." Caitlin's words carried no sense of hesitation, only genuine sincerity. She truly believed that Sarah Grace Patrick was innocent, that she was a victim of a tragedy far greater than herself, not the one who caused it. Throughout their time living together, Caitlin said she never witnessed any concerning behavior from Sarah. No aggression, no deceit, and no sign that she was capable of committing an extreme act. To Caitlin, Sarah was simply a young girl struggling to find her footing amid overwhelming grief. Several other witnesses also took the stand, and all echoed the same sentiment. Sarah Grace Patrick was a polite, gentle girl who had never shown any signs of aggression. Her teachers described her as a quiet but diligent student, someone who always submitted assignments on time, actively participated in discussions, and even helped classmates who were struggling. Throughout her academic years, she had never been cited for disciplinary issues or displayed any concerning behavior. Sarah's friends testified that they had known her for years, studying together, going shopping, watching movies, and sharing their lives like any other teenage girls. To them, Sarah was cheerful, friendly, and a bit sensitive, but never someone with dark or violent tendencies. Every testimony painted the portrait of a normal girl who might have had occasional family conflicts, but was never capable of committing a serious tragedy. Thanks to these accounts, the defense began to regain some balance in the courtroom. The atmosphere seemed to ease as the judge listened attentively, taking notes and weighing the possibility of granting Sarah bail. A cautious sense of optimism spread across the defense table, until the prosecutor rose and called the next witness, Kim Bowling, James Brock's sister. The room instantly grew tense. She wasn't there to speak about character or remorse, but to become the voice of those who were gone, those who no longer had the chance to speak for themselves.
My name is Kim Bowling, and I'm Jamie's sister. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Since this tragic day, my brother Jamie and his wife Kristen were taken from us, I have become their voice as they no longer have one.
As Kim Bowling took the witness stand, she tried to remain composed, but her voice broke after only a few opening words. Each sentence came in fragments, interrupted by sobs, as tears streamed down her trembling face. It wasn't the kind of sorrow that could be performed. It was raw, genuine pain, the kind only someone who has lost a loved one could truly understand.
I would like to share how this brutal tragedy has affected me. I not only lost my brother, but also my sister-in-law in the most horrific way imaginable. Every night I lay awake, unable to sleep, haunted by the thought of what my brother Jamie and Kristen might have experienced in those final moments. With the possibility that they were awake when the defendant entered their room with a gun, and I imagine their terror in their final breaths.
In her testimony before the court, Kim Bowling tearfully spoke about the immeasurable loss her family continued to endure. She described how the tragedy had shattered every sense of normalcy in their lives, how the children would have to grow up without a father, how birthdays and holidays would forever be marked by the emptiness of absence, and how their elderly mother would never recover from the pain of losing her son. In her words, Kim didn't just speak of James as a victim of a heartbreaking case, but as a real person, a loving brother who called to check on her every week, a gentle uncle who doted on his nieces and nephews, and a resilient man who fought to stay alive even when his frail heart depended on a machine to keep beating. James had endured surgeries, pain, and countless medical procedures, all because he wanted more time with his family, hoping to one day see his children grow up.
With all of this in mind, I am deeply concerned about Jaylee's safety should the defendant be released on bond.
In the final part of her testimony, Kim Bowling gathered every ounce of strength she had left to make her plea. Her voice grew firmer, trembling with both grief and fury as she begged the judge to deny bail and keep Sarah Grace Patrick in custody, to protect the community and to ensure justice for those who were gone. Through tears, she said, "Please, do this for my brother, for Kristen, for the children they left behind, and for little Jai, the child who had to see something no one should ever have to see, and who will carry that image for the rest of her life." For Kim Bowling, there was no room for doubt. She believed the evidence was undeniable, that justice could only be served if the person responsible for the tragedy was held fully accountable under the law. No second chances, no bail, and absolutely no release back into society before the court's final verdict. But immediately after Kim's powerful words, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew even heavier as the judge allowed the reading of a written statement from 12-year-old Jaden Brock, James's son. Because he was too young to testify in person, his words were written down and read aloud by a close family friend, Kelly Brown, who struggled to hold back tears as she addressed the court.
My name is Jaden Brock, and I am 12 years old. I wanted to talk today because my dad and stepmom was shot and killed. I miss him every day. What makes me more sad is I trusted Sarah, and I loved her like a sister. Why would she do this to me? And why would she hurt everyone like this? I don't understand why someone would do this, but I know it is not right.
The courtroom was engulfed in silence as the boy's statement came to an end. The pain, fear, and shattered innocence of his childhood were etched into every word. The tragedy had not only taken 2 lives, it had fractured the futures of everyone left behind. From the youngest child to the elderly, from the Brock family to the entire Carrollton community. The sorrow rippled outward, leaving a lasting scar in the memories of all who had ever known them. Meanwhile, Sarah Grace Patrick sat quietly at the defense table, her gaze lowered, avoiding eye contact with anyone around her. The defense team continued their efforts to salvage the situation, arguing that Sarah was merely an immature teenager caught in a series of poor decisions made under immense emotional pressure. They pleaded with the court to see her not as an adult offender deserving punishment, but as a young person in need of help, psychological treatment, and rehabilitation.
So what we have here with Sarah Grace is that she has absolutely no criminal history and is therefore not a risk to the community and not a risk to reoffend.
Listening to the witnesses here, if I weigh these witnesses' testimonies and I weigh what I hear today, I believe those closest, and I say closest, in family relationship expressed that they had vast concerns that she would have the ability to flee, that she would be a danger to the community, that she would be a danger to them, that she would pose a significant risk of intimidating, or actually I think the state steered away from intimidating, or influencing or manipulating witnesses. By finding that, I find the state has met their burden today by preponderance of the evidence. And Miss Patrick, because of that, I'm bound by the law, and I do not believe that you would be a proper candidate for bond at this time.
After hearing all witness testimonies, the judge announced the court's decision. The request for bail filed on behalf of Sarah Grace Patrick was denied. She would remain in custody at the Carroll County Jail. No house arrest, no electronic monitoring, and no conditional release. Sarah would be held without bail until her official trial. At the same time, prosecutors upgraded the charges, bringing a total of 8 counts against her, including 2 counts of intentional homicide, 2 counts of homicide committed during the commission of a felony, as well as charges of aggravated assault and possession of a dangerous object while committing a felony. The defense continued to argue that Sarah was a teenager in the midst of a severe emotional crisis, overwhelmed by pressure and in need of treatment rather than condemnation. They portrayed her as a victim of circumstance, a young person not yet fully developed in judgment, driven into a series of tragic decisions. In contrast, the prosecution presented a forceful argument that Sarah's actions showed clear signs of preparation and calculation. They pointed to her TikTok messages, online searches, and post-tragedy behavior, including the disposal of the dangerous object, as evidence that this was not an impulsive mistake, but a deliberate act. According to the prosecutors, there were 2 sides to the same person. 1, a teenager struggling with emotions, and the other, an individual fully aware of her actions, even attempting to manipulate public perception by reaching out to true crime content creators to shape how the story would be told. To them, This was no longer the reaction of someone consumed by grief. It was a calculated effort to control her image and influence public perception long before the trial began. The trial of Sarah Grace Patrick, the 17-year-old girl accused in connection with the tragic case that claimed the lives of her mother and stepfather on Tyus Road in Carrollton, Georgia, is scheduled to take place on September 22, 2025, marking a pivotal moment in a case that has shaken the entire state. According to the Carroll County Court schedule, the official trial date has been tentatively set for January 5, 2026, provided there are no delays from either the prosecution or the defense. This trial will be the moment when Sarah must face, in full, the evidence gathered over months of investigation, from the family conflicts and forensic traces at the scene to the digital data extracted from her phone, computer, and social media accounts. All of it will be presented publicly before the court, where justice will determine what truly happened inside the small house in Carrollton on that fateful night. The victim's family, friends, members of Catalyst Church, and the local community all watch closely, united by a single hope that after nearly a year of heartbreak, the truth will finally be revealed and justice will be fully served. The tragedy of Sarah Grace Patrick stands as a haunting reminder that sometimes the wounds within a family, if left unhealed, if no one truly listens, can ignite consequences beyond repair. This is not just another case featured in true crime documentary, but a story of loss, of warning signs overlooked, and of the priceless importance of understanding one another before things go too far. We may never fully know what really happened that night, but one truth remains. When resentment replaces love and silence replaces conversation, tragedy can strike any family. Thank you for taking the time to follow today's story on True Crime Documentary. If you feel compassion for James and Kristen Brock, please share this video and leave a comment in their memory. Two people whose lives were taken in a heartbreaking event that shook an entire community. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next true story we share here on True Crime Documentary. See you in the next video.